We are interviewing historic individuals who have influenced the lives of the Covil. We're broadcasting live from Covil's Country RV of the two well-known sisters, Viola and Hazel Wyrick. Our first interview today is with Viola. Viola is the 84-year-old matriarch of the Covil clan. How are you today, Viola?
Fine.
Good. Today we're going to take a little walk down memory lane, and Viola is going to give us some little facts of her life that we think would be interesting to all the Covils. Okay, Viola, tell us a little bit about when you were born.
Well, I don't remember it. Anyway, the first memories were when we stayed in Delgado with my aunt. She had gone to Paper City to plant strawberries and took her children, so we invaded her house and stayed with Uncle Luke while she was gone. And that's the first of my memories of most everything, because that's when I started school and different things.
Well, how about your youth? What do you remember that was really memorable in your life about your youth?
Well, most of my youth was fogged, I might say, because my mother died when I was 8 years old. And my two old maid aunts raised us while my daddy was working on the Pullman train. And he was gone most of the time, so my old maid aunts were the main reason that we were taken care of. Our precepts were mostly school and playing in the yard and things of that sort. But I do remember being in the first grade and being around a boy that was in the neighborhood. His name was Pat Hunt. And every time I go to school, he'd beat me up and send me home. So I don't know whatever became of him, but he was always a roughneck. Anyway, we got through the formidable years and moved back to Barton Avenue. And that's where our original home was, 2015 Barton Avenue. When we were living there, most of my schooling was from there. Some of the things that happened then were indelible in mine, and some were not. My grandmother and grandfather stayed with us, and of course their deaths had a lot of meaning. And we just continued on and going to Isaac Dare School and gaining an education.
Viola, tell us a little bit about your marriage and how you met Victor.
Well, that was farther on down the line. My uncle and aunt run a dairy at Kirkland. And I went out to spend the weekend with a day or two with my cousin. And of course, Victor's daddy ran a store next door to my uncle's. So we went over to the store to buy some candy, and then we met Victor. That's the first seeing him. Then he came over and sat on the porch with us in a swing. And he had been kind of loving up on the oldest daughter, and her name was Myrtle. And she thought he was her boyfriend. Well, I went back to town and went to work at the dime store on the weekend. And who should come in the dime store but Victor? And he asked if he could carry me home that night. So, of course, I said yes. And we started dating maybe once a week, something like that. And just kept right on till we got married. Anyway, it was a real active summer. because we were at the beach and we were at the Ferris wheels and we were everywhere you could think of, Myrtle Beach, everywhere. But we did have a good time. And then he got word that was working then at Block's shirt factory. And he got word through somebody over there that I was in love with an old boyfriend. And that I was planning on him giving me a ring for my birthday. And so Vic came around and picked me up at work, and he took me off to Forest Hill, and he told me I wasn't going with that guy, I was going to go with him. So he asked me to marry him, and we started from there. But we did keep it a secret, and we left and went to Myrtle Beach that Sunday morning. Hazel and Linwood was with us, and we went to this old judge's house, and there was all kinds of guns and cannons and stuff in the office, and we thought we had a shotgun wedding, but we didn't. Anyway, we got married and came back home, and I never will forget the meal we ate at Calabash, I guess it was. We really wolfed some supper down that night. We had ham and egg and buttermilk and all kinds of things. Anyway, he went his way and I went mine, and we just dated just like as usual, now and then, until I had told Florence Finberg, the next door neighbor, that we were married, and I wanted to buy some dishes and things of that sort and hide them at her house. So that was her inkling of us getting married. And she run and told Aunt Mary that I was married. So the gist was up. So we finally, just before Thanksgiving of that year, we started staying together. That was a year of depression, 1932, and it was rough. But he was working in the store for his daddy, and his daddy was driving the school bus. So Nellie had a small child, and she had to have somebody run the store, so Vic was nominated to do that. And I can't remember just what he got a week. It was something in the neighborhood of $4 or $5 a week he got for pay. Of course, he got his cigarettes, and he got a few other things that were needful, and his daddy looked out for us with a car and different things of that sort. But that first year was pretty rough. But we had friends down there, and they always brought us fish. We could go take a bucket and go down to the sound and gather oysters anytime we wanted to. And we did enjoy it down there, even though it was a very cold winter. Then I don't know exactly when it was that we decided to move to town. I went back and got my old job back and moved to town. And that was the beginning, really, of our marriage, was when we moved to town and stayed at Wrightsville Avenue. Had a 2-room apartment. Hazel and Linwood, in the meantime, had got married, and they moved in the apartment too. So she had 2 rooms and I had 2 rooms. And we went to work and come home. I remember it was the first radio that we had was in this apartment. Of course, we had beautiful music over the radio then. We had Guy Lamardo and all those all orchestrated fellers. Anyway, we stayed there until Blocks moved over on, I forgot the street Anyway, it was in the southern part of the town, and we moved over with them and rode back and forth with some people from work. And I stayed there until I was about 4 months pregnant. And then I quit and I went home. And from then on, it was me and Jimmy. Jimmy was he was a strong character. At that time, he had spasmodic stomach and vomited everything he ate. And, we just had a time with him with the colic and things of that sort. And he didn't sleep well, so that kept us up day and night. But he finally grew out of that. We moved from Gibson Avenue over to Barnett Avenue, and this is where Jimmy spent most of his youngest life, was in this house on Barnett Avenue. Had his first birthday party, which was his second birthday, and I guess it was a storm or something like a hurricane came through and flooded everything, so we couldn't go to the park and have our party. We had to have it at home. But one of the outstanding things I remember was what I served, and why I served it I don't know. I had ambrosia for these little kids to eat, and of course they didn't eat it good. But after that, we moved from Barnett Avenue to Front Street, and that's where I was when I got pregnant with Susie. Susie was a beautiful little girl. She was as pretty as she could be, and she was the apple of all of my brother's eyes. They thought she was just simply adorable and was something to play with, I think. Anyway, they thought she was just so good. And one day we had left Front Street and bought a house on Carolina Beach Road. And one day we were sitting around the table, and one of my brothers, Charlie, said, "Let me tell you something Susie did." And he jumped up from the table, and you know what? He stepped right to dab in a pile of you know what. The other brothers had a laugh at him because they said, "Charlie, what did Susie do? Susie has just done it in the floor, and he stepped in it." So that climax was Susie. Then we had Tommy while we were down there, and he was just a good little boy. He was so good that Susie could do anything with him. She took him out in the middle of the highway, and cars coming all up and down the road. She took him and put him in chicken coop and fed him chicken doo-doo. She could get Tommy to do anything there. But then we sold a house on Carolina Beach Road. Big harvest of money, and so that was his way of paying him. So he paid it off, and we moved to Vantage Village. And this is when Ronnie was begat. And I can't tell you how good he was. We decided we'd move back to this little house that Mr. Covil had fixed up for a little barracks it was. And he fixed it up and told us we could move in it. So we moved in it, and this is where we lived when Ronnie was born. He had a little doll crib that he stayed in. He was a little boy. And just as good as he could be. He just slept good, and was just an ideal child. And we put up wall board and things of that sort all around him, and he just slept right on there. But he stayed there for a good length of time. I don't remember just how long now. But Dean was bounded up. And so Dean was a headache from the very beginning. He started out and he couldn't digest his food, and I thought it was, well, it was the food. He changed his food. He went to the doctor and he changed his food. And from one thing to the other, until the doctor finally told me that he was going to have to put him in the hospital. Well, he just about floored me then, because I saw no reason that he would need to go to the hospital. But he did, and he says he needs a surgeon too. So I said, well, we don't have a surgeon. And he says, well, I'll get one. And he got Dr. Cooper to operate on him. And he had a obstruction between his stomach and his lower intestines, and he couldn't digest his food. It wouldn't go through. So operated on him, and he just blossomed then. He just was one of the best little kids you've ever seen. And of course, who knows why or when, here comes Amelia. And we were, I can't remember just what we were doing when Amelia was born, but I must have been back at work, and Aunt Helen was taking care of Dean. So I evidently had gone back to work and was working in the shirt factory. And later I decided to change over and went to the tie factory. And I worked there for 15 years and then decided to retire. So from then on I was retired. I didn't work no more, other than I did some nursing and things of that sort with Miss Leela and Leela Godwin it was. She needed round-the-clock nursing, so I was friends with one of the nurses, and she asked Mr. Godwin about me working there. So I did. I worked all 3 shifts, sometimes one, sometimes the other. But that was a long, drawn-out process there. And she died, and of course they closed the estate, and I didn't work no more then. But I was voted in before then for Relief Society president, and I really enjoyed the work in the Relief Society because it gave me outlook of other women and how their lives were. And we worked there, I can't tell you how many years I worked, but it seemed like 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere along in there. And then I asked to be released, and they, of course I did. But then I kept going to church and doing the things they did, and next thing I knew, they called me. Ralph White was a bishop. He called me in, wanted to know would I be a Relief Society president. I said, you don't want me. He says, yes I do. I said, tell me why you want me, as old as I am. I'm up in my 60s. And he says, because you'll get the work done. And so I stayed in there until he could get somebody to replace me. So all my life has been, and still since I joined the church, has been the main interest in my life, is being members of the church and bringing up kids and church and knowing that they were taught right if they don't do right. These things we can't make them do, but we wish that they would. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Viola, thank you for sharing all those interesting moments of your life. We've got a few more questions, if you don't mind, because you've lived 84 years now, and you've lived through a lot of historic moments. Tell us what it was like living through the Depression and living through the scary, frightening conditions of World War II. What do you remember about those two big occasions?
Most of our problem was getting food. You couldn't buy sugar, you couldn't buy lard, you couldn't buy a lot of things that you had to have to cook with. And I remember going to market one Saturday morning. I said, well, I won't be outdone, I'll go get something. So at the market I didn't find anything but chickens and fish. And I got up to where they had chickens, and just as I got there, this woman bought the last one. And I was really outdone because I had got out early to get something to eat. And I said, well, I want to be outdone, so I went on around to the fish market and got me a big old flounder and took him home, and that's what we had for Sunday dinner. But we cooked, in Massett Village, we cooked on a coal stove. It was a big old range with, you fired it with coal, and it was as smutty and nasty as it could be, but we made out with it anyway. But there was a limit on sugar and flour and all kinds of things that we couldn't get for cooking. But we got 3 gallons of gas a week in the car, so we saved that to go to town and find something to eat. And we raised some chickens, so that was our backbone. We got 50 fryers and raised them. So we ate chicken quite often. But this was a lot of it. We lived on Carolina Beach Road, and the soldiers would not be there across the street in the evening, and you wake up the next morning and be a whole encampment across the street with their cannons and bulldozers and whatever you call it they had to use. But Jimmy would always go and get some water and put it in a jug and carry it over to the soldiers over there when they were in camp, because it was so hot and they didn't have water supply. But mostly it was you just didn't do anything for a pleasure or anything. There was no such thing as going to a movie or anything, because you just didn't have money.
That was in the Depression?
Uh-huh. Well, Vic was working in the shipyard then. He was working in the shipyard, and it was pretty good pay, but you couldn't spend it. You didn't have nothing to spend it on. Anyway, the depression was a bad time.
What did y'all eat? You mentioned it was hard to get chickens.
Well, mostly we depended on dried beans and garden stuffs, and beef was out of the question. But we depended on sausage and things of that sort that we had with hogs, you know. We had a hog and killed it. But if we had not been on Carolina Beach Road, I don't know what we would have done, because we couldn't raise hogs and chickens.
Well, during World War II, you had some similar conditions where you had to obtain some things with ration coupons.
Well, yeah, it was ration then. But it was just bad. I remember one time that Papa stayed on Barnett Avenue, and I don't know what me and Hazel. I guess we were in Rackley Avenue.
Upstairs.
And he didn't have anything to feed the boys with. And we went to the grocery store and got a few things and sent them over back to him. And Aunt Mary said many a time she didn't have nothing but cornbread that she cooked. And it hit them harder than it did me and Hazel, because we were out working. We did have access to a piece of steak now and then.
Well, I've heard you tell stories about during World War II, and I think families had to practice what they would do if there were to be some sort of an attack on the United States. What were those like?
Well, I had air raid wardens, air raid sirens, and those sirens would go off. It was all over the place around there, surrounding territory. But Mac and Vic were air raid wardens, and they had to get out if these sirens came at night and go to houses and see that the lights were out. There was no lights showing or anything. And one night we were caught up at Max and Ann's, and we had I guess we'd been crabbing, I'm not sure. But we were sitting there eating crabs, and the siren blowed, and they had to take off, and we turned the flashlight upside down on the table, and they crabbed right on. But we didn't let the air raids stop us anyway. But there was reports that there was a submarine off the coast that had been sighted. A lot of times the air raid was a sign. I know one time we were over on 3rd Street and at Bess's, and the air raid came, siren came, and everybody had to get out of their cars, and they were laying all out in the median of the road asleep because of the air raid. You couldn't move. You didn't have no lights or anything. So wherever you were, you had to stay until it got light enough for you to move. It was a kind of rough time sometimes. That's about the general portion of it. Other than the boys going off to war and getting word from them where they were and what they were doing. Of course, they didn't tell us where they were, but they would give us an idea about what the climate was. If their feet were freezing or whatever.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about being Relief Society president. Tell us a little bit about when you first joined the church, how you happened to find out about the church.
Well, first recollection was the missionaries, state missionaries, came to the house, and Vic and I had worked out in the garden till dark, and then we went in and washed up and had supper. And they came after dark, and Vic was about teetotal with beer, and he went to the door, and they said, well, we'll just come back another time. And they did. It was Jim Henderson and Bill Baker, and they came to the door, and Vic invited them in. Really, he was the one that was intent with the teachings. He had found something he wanted to hear. And so we had the missionaries, and finally, well, Jim was in Raleigh at that time, and in the Navy, and he come home, and we had joined the church, booze and everything, and he couldn't find us. But anyway, he later had the missionaries come and teach him. And I guess he'll tell that in his story. But, it was what real awakening for us. Because we found something that people were people. They wasn't stuck up or anything. They were just good all around people.
And you mentioned you were Relief Society president twice. You were also in charge of turkey dinners that they used to have. What was that like?
Well, that was during the first time I was the Relief Society president, and we then had the money. We could take money that we had raised and use it in the Relief Society. The money didn't go back to Salt Lake; it stayed with us. So I said, well, got up with Myrna Henderson. She got talking about turkey dinners, and so I quizzed her and asked her, couldn't we have one at our church? And we did. I can't tell you how many we had, but every year, once a year, we'd have turkey dinner, and we did sales all over the place. The men took their cars and delivered the dinners, and we had people in the building that hadn't even been to church in years. And the turkey dinner brought them in. So I do think it was a real thing that happened to the church, that it kind of woke the people to the atmosphere around the church, how they welcomed visitors and all.
Wasn't some of that money used to help build the new church on College Road?
I'm sure it was. Didn't have any use for that, because when we got the money from the turkey dinner, we turned it over to the bishop, and they used it accordingly with what they wanted. I do know at one time we were allowed to buy some pots and pans and things of that sort, and they were there when we closed up shop, but I don't know where all this stuff went. It was up to the bishop to do what he wanted to do.
Viola, a lot of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren don't remember Victor very well. Would you tell us some of your favorite memories of Victor, some of the hobbies he liked, some of the foods he enjoyed eating, so they'll get to know a little bit more about him?
Vic didn't have many hobbies. He loved to read.
He loved to fish.
He loved to fish. And if he could, he was going to go fishing. Whether it was in a boat or on a pier. And he just liked seafood good enough that he was going to go catch it. But he was a playmate. In fact, he played with the children. He'd get out. I know there's a picture somewhere of him and Travis with the lawnmower, out having a big time with the lawnmower. And he did. He got kind of cranky later in life, but that was due to his health, I think, more than anything else. But most of the time, he was a very cheerful person. Never met a stranger. That's why he had so many salesman jobs, I guess. Except the insurance, anything he could sell, he'd sell it.
That's good. That's interesting. Well, Viola, you've done a lot for your children to give them memories. All of us have treasures that you've made, tablecloths that you've crocheted, bedspreads, baby slippers, all kinds of arts and crafts that you've made. What are some of the things that you hope your children and grandchildren and great-children have learned from you that they will pass on to their children and grandchildren? What are your values that you think are most important to remain in the Covil family?
I think one of the best things that I could wish on any of them is that they would leave good lives. Be somebody. Learn all you can learn. Go to school and further your educations and just get to be number one. But never look back on something that you should have done. Just go ahead and do it as you go along. Because a lot of things will stump you. No matter what age you are. You're going to get some backlash with lots of things. But nothing's better than the gospel, to have it in your life and fulfill it to what you think you have done the best. Just do your best.
Thank you, Viola. Thank you for sharing all these memories of the 84 past years of your lives. We appreciate that, and we'll always treasure these memories as we treasure you. Thank you.